The Candid Frame is supported by donations by listeners just like you. Help us to bring you great conversations with great photographers. Support the show today with your monthly contribution through our Patreon effort at patreon.com/The Candid Frame, or click on the link in the show notes or the website at thecandidframe.com. Thank you.
This is Ibarianax, and this is The Candid Frame. Happy New Year, and welcome to a new season of The Candid Frame. To begin this year, we sit down with a photographer who I've known virtually for several years, but who I only met in the real world at the end of last year. Lauren Wells is one of the photographers who you heard from in a recent episode, as she was one of the panelists at the Miami Street Photography Festival. Hers is an interesting story. As many people I've interviewed on this show, her professional life didn't begin as a photographer. Instead, she began her working life as a lawyer. The thing that led her to that career are things that many of us are very familiar with. Feelings of wanting security, financial stability, and so on. But the urge to be creative, to do something more with her life, was also pulling at her. And while it didn't come easily, she was finally able to make the leap, which has resulted in her now making a living as a professional photographer. Such changes are never easy, but as you look forward to the new year, I hope that this conversation and the many others that are coming later on will help inspire you to make 2018 your year. Well, Lauren, welcome to The Candid Frame. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Ibarianax. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I enjoyed having a chance to meet you in person, because we've been, I think, known of each other, at least online, for a while.
Yeah, and in nice weather to meet was great.
Oh, yeah. You know, it's very interesting checking out your story, because I found it very curious that you're probably at least the second photographer that I've met, or that I've interviewed, who started off in career as a lawyer before they transitioned to becoming a photographer. How did you decide to get involved in the law in the first place?
It was the path of least resistance.
Really? I wouldn't think the law would be the path of least resistance. How so?
I know, in hindsight, it really wasn't. But it was very safe. I was the oldest child, very responsible, and I was a good student. My parents, my teachers always told me I'd make a good lawyer because I had strong opinions and I expressed them. And I guess I was somewhat of a logical thinker. And when I got to college, the only thing I knew I wanted to do was to go abroad and become fluent in Spanish. That was a passion of mine. I had studied in Spain for a bit, and that didn't compute. I didn't know what to do with that. And I was terrified of going abroad without any structure, just trying to learn Spanish and then coming back to New York City where everyone and their mother speaks Spanish. So most of the people I knew were going to law school, and that's just what you did. It was the next step. And it was a safe one for me. And I thought, well, I have 3 years to figure out what I want to do by going to law school. Forget the fact that I took on debt to pay for law school. It was just safe because going into the world and getting a job, and I didn't know how to do that. I was terrified. So law school was it. And then I graduated law school, didn't want to be a lawyer, but still didn't know what I wanted to do. So I pursued that path for 16 years.
Wow. That's a long run.
Yeah. And I just thought, I think unconsciously, that somebody would knock on my door and say, hey, it's time to go this way. But it actually did end up, they say, nothing is linear in life. If you want to get somewhere, usually you take a lot of turns. And I ended up moving back to Spain as a lawyer, becoming fluent in Spanish, which was one of my dreams to do. And I enjoyed a lot of aspects of the business part of my job. I met a lot of people. I had to deal with a lot of people, very difficult people, all kinds of people, which is just an asset no matter what you do in life. And it's really helped me in photography. So in the end, I probably wouldn't change a thing. Maybe I'd cut down the amount of years I practiced law, but I think I still would have gone through it.
It's interesting because I think a lot of people relate to that experience. You're young and you really don't know what you want to do, but the pressure's on to sort of figure it out, especially by the time that you're in college. Your parents are saying, "Oh, what are you going to do?" And then you see your friends who seem to have a clearer idea than you do, right?
Right. It's all a lie.
I was going to say, but it's sort of the experience that I think many people have. And I was wondering during that time that you were, studying law and then practicing law, that how the desire to be creative, it didn't just suddenly erupt. Did you have sort of glimmers of this, even though you were practicing law? Yeah,
but it was so repressed. Somebody had asked me once, I was at one of my jobs as a lawyer, and I had learned everything I could learn, and I was really bored. And somebody asked me, what would you do if you could do anything? And I said, well, I would work for a Spanish company, or I would do something creative. And I was a very creative child, as I think all children are. And I think everybody is creative in their own way. I was very artistically inclined, and I just didn't think that could amount to anything. So, and that brought a lot of joy in my life, and I just buried it. It was almost like a cognitive dissonance. Like, you can't do that and make a living, so forget about it. Mm-hmm. I didn't know I didn't even know that I was repressing it. And it really was when I got to college that I repressed it. Because in high school, I used to do a lot of painting. People would give me their T-shirts and their sweatpants, and I would do like Jackson Pollock splatter designs and make money. And I loved making things. So it was always there. And I'm trying to think how, and it just came back when I decided to travel. I decided to take I was between jobs, and I thought I should take a photography class because I was going to go traveling for 6 months by myself. So I wanted to take good pictures. So when I took this photography class, it rekindled something in me that I had forgotten about. So it was always there, all these, but I just didn't know how to read the signs.
So was it the class itself, or was it the traveling that really sort of ignited the spark?
It was, I would say at first it was the traveling, because that's a good question. The traveling, having my camera, I was so present to everything, and everything was visually interesting. And I mean, I just couldn't get enough. But that's easy, because when we travel, everything's new. The test was when I came home, and everything that was mundane before, according to my perspective, was suddenly interesting. And to be able to photograph in my backyard, so to speak, and just be able to watch people walking by on the street that I never paid attention to before really touched on something. And it brought back all those feelings of joy and creativity, and it woke me up for good and bad. Because the good is I could never go back to the way I was and do what's expected of me and play it safe. The other side is, okay, well, it's a little harder. There's no map, mm-hmm. and it gets scary, but I don't have a choice.
That experience, I think, resonates so much with me, because it's this whole idea that you're doing what you feel like you're supposed to. While there may be some satisfaction that comes from it, it's nothing like the joy of doing something where you're being creative, where you're expressing yourself. Yet, It seems like there's so much pushback. And I don't want to say it's pushback so much from society. It's the pushback that you yourself give yourself.
Absolutely.
And it can be such a struggle to not only sort of reclaim that for yourself, but to give yourself permission to be okay with doing it.
Absolutely.
So,
there's so much. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go on.
So I'm just wondering how how that experience was for you as you started thinking about maybe this is what I want to do rather than, continue practicing law.
I discovered all of what you said after I quit my job, in that I finally got the courage to quit my job. And then I still woke up every day with fear and thinking that once I got rid of this job and started to pursue something I was interested in, I would just automatically be happy. But I woke up with the same mindset as I did when I had my legal job. And I realized that all of that conditioning, we have different parts of our brain. There's that we're built to survive, or that part of our brain, the lizard part of our brain, really is trying in a sense to protect us. But I think it gets a little out of proportion. And so when I would see that I still had the same stresses, even though I had no stress in my life at this time. I had saved a lot of money when I first quit my job. So the first year or so, I had nothing to worry about, but I was worried. And that's when I woke up to the fact, wow, this is really, I have to work on this almost as much as the craft of photography or anything else. And it's the psychology and learning to live with fear. And because the more I resist all of that, the worse it gets. So it became a practice to just be okay with the fear and go out into the world. And I still have it to this day, and I don't think that's ever going to go away. I don't even know that it's gotten any better. It's just gotten easier to handle it. But the fear hasn't subsided. Just the ability to handle it has gotten easier.
Yeah. Well, I want to get back to that, but before I do, I want to talk about your transition, because it didn't come easy for you, to just quit your job. It had been something that you had sort of forestalled multiple times. Tell us about that.
The times that I had tried to move on and couldn't, and then finally did, or just...
Yeah.
I realized after I had this job at the Spanish company, which I loved. It was the best job I had ever had. And I got to live in Spain, but I still didn't like what I was doing, but I loved the rest of my life. And I came back. There was a glitch in my visa, and somebody didn't want to, we had a new head of HR. They didn't want to sign my visa till they knew I was paying taxes and where I was supposed to in Spain and so forth. So I had to rush home within a week. So because my visa was running out, and it was just, everything became a clusterfuck. And my plan was to go back to Spain, but the company wanted me to stay in New York. So I said, well, can we work out something? And they laid me off, and I got a great severance package. So I said, wow, finally, this is my departure. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went and I studied. I went traveling for 6 months, and I lined up another job in Spain, which had nothing to do with law. It was working on a production for a production company, actually, with friends of mine. And when I got home from traveling, it just intuitively, I knew it wasn't the right thing to do. So I didn't. Now what do I do? I don't want to go back to the law. I'm now living with my parents again, and I'm in my mid-30s. And I decided to study yoga because I just love doing yoga, and I thought it would help ground me, and I'll figure something out. 9 months went by. I still hadn't figured something out. And a friend called me and asked if I would work part-time as a lawyer, and I was going to get paid a full-time salary. So I was still studying yoga, worked 22 hours a week, and I took this job. And then I took a trip for 2 weeks to Greece and did a photo workshop. And I loved it. And I said, oh, duh, the light bulb went off. This is what I want to do with my life. I have the finances and I have the time. And literally the day I got back to my job, my boss said, you have to start working full time here. So I said, okay, it's 3 months to get a bonus. I'll wait till then and then I'll quit. And then they prolonged. It took 6 months to get the bonus. And I said, well, there's only 6 months to get the next bonus, so I'll stay. And that went on for 5 years. I started to beat myself up a lot that I'm such a wimp. I'm never going to quit my job. I had another opportunity to quit. I had taken another photo workshop, and I came back. I said, this time I'm going to do it. And the same boss came in and said that he was leaving and he was going to make me the general counsel of the firm. And that responsible person inside of me did not want to let him down. What it really comes down to is that there was a lot more fear under there than I was really recognizing. And so I had this excuse, well, I can't quit now because I have to do this. And I started to beat myself up that I'm never going to do this. And somebody very wise said to me, you know, the more you fight it, the longer it's going to take. It's back to the resistance thing. If you just accept that this is where you are, you need to be here for some reason. And you don't know why, but if you're there, you need to be there because wherever we are in life is where we're supposed to be. And if you look at it that way, I promise you, when the time is right, it's just going to happen and there's going to be no drama. So I said, okay. And I just started to appreciate what this job gave me. It gave me financial security. I had good friends. I had people to interact with every day. It was intellectually stimulating. So I looked at all the positives. And then 6 months later, I was ready. And that was it. And I was out of there.
That is a great lesson.
Yeah. And I'm, still trying to...
You're still trying to what? I lost that.
Oh, to practice that.
So
just to be where I am and not judge it.
So tell me about that transition to trying to not just, practice photography because it gave you so much joy, but now to be reliant on that to earn a living.
Yeah, that was also very scary. The first 2.5 years, I had a lot of savings, so I was able to take my time. And I wasn't pounding the pavement. I would do events for friends, and then I would get referred from there. My brother had a company in Chicago. He needed someone to photograph interior spaces for stuff that he had installed. So I learned interior photography by doing that. And then I got jobs with real estate brokers here shooting apartments, and little by little I was honing my craft and getting jobs, and then but I still wasn't earning enough to survive. And then my money started to run out, and I panicked, and I started to look for a temporary legal job to rely on until I got on my feet. And I pounded the pavement like crazy, and nothing was happening. Everything was falling through. And I was so scared and frustrated. And I finally said, wait a second, I am trying so hard to get a job that I don't even want because I'm so terrified. But then why did I quit my job to begin with? I might as well go back to law full time if this is what it's going to amount to. I'm miserable right now. And I remembered that letting go. And this is going to it may sound crazy, but the best thing that happened to me was come December of that year, whatever it was, I had no money left to pay for my rent for January. And I've always been a saver. I've always had $1 in my pocket. I just, what the frick am I going to do? And I let go. And I just said, something is going to work out. I have to trust that, or else I'm just so tired of being stressed and afraid. And every day I'd wake up and just practice trusting, and it worked out. It turns out I had taken on a line of credit with a bank years before, and I had never used it. So I used that line of credit. It cost me almost nothing to borrow to pay my rent for that month. And then by the end of the month, I had some jobs lined up. So I was able to pay back the line of credit. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to have to do this the next month. And somehow the next month, the money magically arrived through photography jobs. And then the following month, a job fell into my lap that was a part-time job, had nothing to do with photography. It was working on my computer, a laptop, anywhere, remotely, as many hours as I wanted a week or as little hours, good money, didn't interfere with my photography. And that got me through a year. And then it came about, it was one summer I was doing so much work for photography that I didn't have time to do this other job. And then the other job dried up. And I got terrified again. And I said, wait a second, I've just earned all this income from photography. I guess I don't need that job anymore. So it was all about trusting. And that's pretty much how my transition occurred. And each year it gets a little better and I get a little more confident. I make a little more money. And that's pretty much how it's going.
Tell me about your personal work, because I love the work that you've done in Coney Island. And I think one of the things that can be difficult for people who are trying to build a career or are trying to even transition is finding the time for the work that really brings them joy, as opposed to doing work that is or potentially could lead them to earning some income, if not a living, as a photographer. Tell me about, making the time for that kind of photography.
I just do it. I used to make time where I would carve out, or I just had the time. I didn't even have to carve it out. As a freelancer, I have enough time within a week, usually, to do something. And I would spend a few hours going out shooting. And of course, in the summer, I would go to Coney Island more than the winter. Sometimes I would go in the winter, but not often. I would go on the weekends. And it just brought me so much joy that it was so easy to do. I didn't have to force myself. But then I started to get a little bored with street photography and everything else. And it was just hard to push myself to get out there. So I started, first of all, allowing myself not to want to do it. That's okay. We all go through periods where things change, and they're usually temporary. They're usually getting us to some other point that we don't know about yet. And then I just started carrying my camera around everywhere. So when I'm just out in my normal day, if I see something, I shoot it. I have my camera. And that took some of the pressure off of needing to want to do this all the time. Because I know a lot of photographers who say they have to shoot. They have to shoot. It's almost the camera's attached to their arm. And connected to their heart. They have to do it. And there are times that I'm just not in the mood. But I haven't found it hard to create the time, so to speak, to separate from my my commercial work. But also now, as I take inventory, each year I try to go past my comfort zone a little. And I said, what is it that I really want? And I really want to make a living more based on what I love to do. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to make my money through doing my street photography necessarily, but I want to do something somehow that brings me, that's connected to my personal work. So for instance, I love to travel. I used to live in Spain. I love Spain and I wanted to go back there. So I've looked at opportunities to get me back there. One of them being is I have a plan to do a workshop there in the summer. So I need to go after it, these things. Nobody's going to hand them to me. So I got a phone call. Somebody, a company saw my work published and they had asked to do, if I would be interested in doing a commercial job for them based on my personal work. We're still in discussion, but if that comes to fruition, I mean, that's would be amazing to be paid to do something I was doing anyway, just because I love it.
You were talking earlier about fear of transitioning and, from being a lawyer to becoming a photographer. And, you avidly practice street photography and your work in Coney Island. I really love for the intimacy that you're able to evoke in your photographs. And part of that is the proximity by which you photograph a lot of the people there. And I want to know what role, if at all, fear played in terms of you creating those kinds of images.
Fear is with me all the time. I'm often afraid to shoot candidly because people, it can be invasive for people, and so there is often a bit of fear. But when I feel that fear, I kind of check my intuition. What the fear is? Is it me, or is it because I'm really being invasive? And when I realize if it's just me, then I have to shoot. I have to take the picture. But also, there are plenty of times when I'm just, when people, either they don't see me or when they do, they're open to it. And that's part of me being open to it. There's so much of photography as psychology, at least I think so, where what I bring to the collaboration, because it's always a collaboration, whether you're speaking to your subjects or not. My intention is, from my perspective, pure and good, then I think that emanates. And a lot of people don't mind having their picture taken either. So it's a combination. It's the fear, I just overcome it, or there's welcoming, and that's great. But either way, I'm taking the picture.
One of the things I've been writing about, I keep basically a photo ledger of my experiences. And one of the things I've, been focusing on is what you just described, that my own fear about directing the camera towards a stranger, and recognizing that each time that I feel that fear or I feel that anxiety and I make the choice to make the photograph is a way of sort of building the strength to be able to face fear, instead of, being so absorbed and caught up by the fear and just thinking about it, being this hamster on a treadmill that's just running and running and running, and not getting anywhere. And just being so caught up in the fear and reinforcing that feeling and all the physicality that goes with it, that when I'm out in the world photographing and I make the choice to make an image despite that feeling, I'm sort of developing the muscle memory of how to contend with fear. Because most times when I do make the photograph, whatever I was fearing or anxious about doesn't happen.
Right.
Right. And I have a photograph. I have a result that would not have happened had I not made that choice. So what you're describing, I completely connect with, and it really resonates with me. And it makes me realize the importance of not just photography, but any act, and especially a creative one, that allows you to come up to that curtain, which is fear, and to be able to move through it and do it repeatedly, so that you learn that it's okay to not only feel the fear, like you said earlier, but that you have what it takes to be able to move through it.
Yep, that's so well said. And I think a lot of people don't do certain things with photography, although they would like to, because they're afraid. And to me, the trick is to just get to the edge of your comfort zone. Maybe not, jump into a body of water with rocks at the bottom from 1,000 feet. Maybe you start with 10 feet with no rocks, but little by little, you build that muscle. At least for me, that's how it is. And I agree with you wholeheartedly.
So, you had this experience, years of experience as a lawyer. What about that experience and that skill helped you when it came to the business of photography? Dealing
with people has been the biggest, and this is for business. It's, forget about the paperwork and the money aspect and all of that. It's dealing with people, and it is the same in every profession. And every job I have ever gotten in my life has been not because of my resume, whether it was good or not good enough. I've had plenty of interviews where I didn't have the experience needed for the job. And in fact, the last one, I got this job at the Spanish company, the person who interviewed me said I didn't have enough experience. And then 2 weeks later called me back to say, I just think you belong here and I want to create a position for you. And it was just because of the way I knew how to get along or deal with people and difficult people. And when I think that's the biggest, that helped me more than anything. So, and especially with photography, because people can be very sensitive about how they look if I'm photographing a person, and just knowing to be patient, knowing how to just kind of put yourself in someone else's shoes and understand where they're coming from so as to create harmony, because it's so easy to, to create somewhat of polarization or a tension, and to learn how to diffuse that tension in any situation is golden.
So tell me about having that obvious strength in terms of having had that experience. When you're trying to make a living as a photographer, when you're in a market that is inundated with photographers. Mm-hmm. So were you able to recognize that as a strength almost immediately, or is that something that you sort of figured out as you went along?
I figured it out as I went along. It was something I remembered. Once I figured it out, I said, oh, right. How could I forget? This is no different than anywhere else. And people, they hire people who they like. They rehire people who they like and get along with. And, for me, it was a little hard for me because I'm all about the work. Even as a lawyer, I always wanted to be respected for my work, not because I got along well with the boss or this or that. And especially my personal work, I don't want to get somewhere because someone likes me. If they need to like my work. And sometimes I won't even apply to a competition if I have a friend who's judging it. Because I just want it to be because of, I like when people don't even know who I am and they're just seeing my work. But life is a little more complex than that. And when you meet anybody and you connect and you like their work, when you meet them, if you like them, it kind of enhances everything. And if you don't like them, it detracts. So it's just a part of reality. And when I realized that, it took me a while to remember that. But once I did, it was helpful.
You said earlier about, that so many of your friends and people that you knew were practicing law or being those kinds of professionals. And then when you made the transition here, I'm sure that a lot of people looked at you sideways trying to figure out what the hell do you think you're doing, right?
Yes.
So part of being able to live out your truth is who you surround yourself with. Mm-hmm. And how did that change? And what kind of choices did you make with respect to the people who were around you, especially once you made the decision that this is what I'm going to do?
I'm lucky that I have my really good friends are just so supportive. We know how to support each other, and just whatever is best, whatever that person thinks is best for them, I'm going to support them, and vice versa. And we can talk out the pros and the cons, and they can help me get grounded. But I have a lot of supportive people in my life. Even my parents, who understandably were concerned, they also knew to just kind of maybe keep their mouth shut. And I could sense that, they were concerned, but that they just had to you have to let your kids go. And I'm an adult, so they knew that they had to do that. And I think they're proud of me because they see that I've really given it my all and I really enjoy it, and I'm making something from it. And the people that didn't support me or who were judgmental, I knew it came from their own fear, so I just wouldn't talk to them about it.
How important was it to get sort of jacked in with your own community of creatives, especially photographers?
It was and still is important. It took me a while, and I wasn't trying. I didn't know that's what I needed. And then when it came about, I realized, oh, I need this. I think social media has been incredible for that. I met so many people, so many photographer friends that I have today and creative friends through social media, which has been amazing. And, but I also, I'm a little bit sick of social media. I just needed a break, and I haven't been on it that much lately. It's too much, for me at this point right now. But, yeah, having, friends who, it's not just, photographers and artists. I really think it's anybody who, everybody has a creative desire. And I think being able to tap into that or allow somebody to help bring it out of somebody. I mean, I have a lot of friends who are not artists, so to speak, professionally, but they all have creative desires, and most of them have creative outlets. So I connect to them through that as well.
You said earlier that when you were trying to get out of it, you had this sort of inner voice that was sort of speaking to you, saying, you need to make a change. You're not happy doing this. It was really difficult to move past that. And it seems like, especially over the last, several years, not only have you gone out and become a professional photographer, but you're doing a lot of things that really sort of serve you. And I'm wondering, what do you do now? Do you have any sort of practice that allows you to sort of continue to sort of reaffirm your ability to listen to that inner voice rather than, succumb to the fears, succumb to the anxiety? Yes,
it's called being so sick and tired of feeling fear and anxiety that something has to change. Really, I mean, I told you earlier when I quit my job as a lawyer and I had nothing to worry about. I got to sleep as late as I wanted in the beginning, and I'd still wake up stressed and fearful. So I knew it was me, and it wasn't anything in my external environment. And I knew that I had to learn how to deal with it. And that made it much easier because, well, if it's just me, then it's in my control to change that. It is a habit that I try to cultivate. It is hard. It's like anything else. Practice helps a lot. And I don't know that, I don't think anyone, well, unless, some of the enlightened people on the planet, but I am certainly not one of them. I think we all have these kind of fears. I don't know that they'll ever go away, but I used to do formal meditation where I would sit and close my eyes, and now I just try to watch my thoughts. And when I go negative, I see myself looping, and I see how my body gets stressed. Or vice versa. If my body's stressed, my thoughts will start going negative. So I try to just step away, take a breath, and not get into the weeds of it and just not resist it. Just, okay, I'm having a bad moment. And that moment can change in an instant. And again, it's all about not resisting and just letting go. So I practice that every minute that I'm aware of it.
It's a good skill to have. So,
yeah, needed.
So my last question that I ask each guest is I ask them to recommend another photographer for our listeners to discover and explore on their own, and it can be anyone, someone you've long admired or someone you've recently discovered. So who would that photographer be and why?
Okay, well, I have two. I couldn't decide, so I'll just mention them both really quickly. The first is John Kroll. He's a good friend of mine, and he used to be a journalist for the Miami Herald and some other newspapers in Florida. And his work is just soulful and humble, and as is he. And he's coming out with a new edition of a book called Cracker, which is about Florida cowboys. And it's just lovely. So he's the first one. And then the second one is Evgenia Arbugueva. She was born in somewhere in Siberia. She doesn't live there anymore, I don't think. But as a child, she grew up there and in this small military town. And she had some nostalgia to go back to visit where she had grown up as a child. And she took the most incredible pictures of this dilapidated place and made it look almost fantasy-like. And it's just beautiful work.
Oh, I look forward to checking that out.
Yeah, it's really great.
Well, Lauren, thank you so much for sharing your time with me again. It really was a pleasure.
Thanks, Ibarionex. It was really nice to be here.
Thanks to Lauren for spending time with me. Check out her work by visiting laurenwells.com. One of the ways I'll be working to change what we offer here at TCF is writing regular blog posts on our site. They'll come out each Wednesday, and you'll find them at thecandidframe.com. My first article talks about ISO and how to use ISO to ensure a sharp photograph. I hope you find it helpful. And you can show your support of The Candid Frame by writing a review in the iTunes Store. It not only helps our ranking, but it helps us to stand out among the many thousands of podcasts that are out there. If you believe in what we're doing, take the time today to write a review. It only takes a few minutes and will make a huge difference. You can also support the show by making a monthly contribution through Patreon. Visit patreon.com/The Candid Frame, or you'll find a link in the show notes and the Candid Frame website. Or if you just want to make a one-time contribution to the show, you can do so via PayPal by clicking on our donate button on the Candid Frame website or show notes. Thanks to Brandon Witch for his recent contribution. Thanks for letting us know what the show means to you. To access our complete archive of interviews, download the free Candid Frame app, available for Apple iOS and Android. Not only will you immediately receive the latest episode on your phone or tablet, but you can now easily share your favorite episodes on your social networks and help spread the word. And if you want to drop me a line with comments or suggestions for the show, you can email me directly from the app. Download it today by clicking on the link in the show notes or the website at thecandidframe.com. The Candid Frame's audio engineer is Martin Taylor. You can find at theothermartintaylor.com. The show's senior producer is Cynthia Parker, and our music is from Kevin MacLeod, whose royalty-free music can be found at incompetech.com. And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at simply @IbadianX. And this is IbadianX, and this is The Candid Frame.